This is the Music History In-Depth podcast for October 16th through the 22nd. On this week's show, 2 decisions concerning one item saves some but dooms others. Also, hot grits can make you feel born again, but not in the way that you think. And we celebrate a lot of birthdays by singling out an icon for what he did for musicians everywhere. There are times in your life when making one decision, whether you know it or not, probably ended up saving your life. For some, it's taking a left instead of a right, or waiting 20 seconds instead of 30 seconds for something. For me, it was when I took a current job instead of taking a job that at the time was on an upper floor of the old World Trade Center. You just never know. In music, I know of 4 decisions concerning air travel that probably ended up saving someone's life. One is when Mark Wahlberg missed one of those flights from Boston on that same fateful day that I was just referencing that I had. Another is Waylon Jennings giving up his seat on a plane that later crashed, killing Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Richie Valens. Yet another is when Eric Clapton gave up his seat on a helicopter that later crashed, killing Stevie Ray Vaughan. The fourth is the basis for this next story. Back in the mid-1970s, the band Lynyrd Skynyrd was doing pretty well. They released their debut album in 1973 and scored a huge hit with the song Freebird, otherwise known as that song some drunken idiot always yells out at any concert, even hip-hop ones. Play Freebird! They followed it up with more albums and became a huge hit, especially in the southern rock area. All of this success came after years of touring around the South, working on their shows and making themselves better. In October of 1977, they released their 5th album. They decided to go out on tour to support the album, as bands always do. It was going to be their biggest tour yet. Unfortunately for them, a decision that they made would end up tragically costing them. However, an earlier decision probably ended up saving another band that was getting big at the same time. In that same time period, a band out of Boston named Aerosmith was getting big. Starting in 1973 with their debut album, the band was on a roll, and in 1977 they released the album Draw the Line. They decided to also go out on tour, which is when they got the nickname the Toxic Twins due to all the behavior going on between Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. Here is where making a decision changed everything. Since Aerosmith was going out on tour, they went looking for a charter plane to fly them around in. They looked at a Corvair CV300 that was kept in Addison, Texas, but they decided not to use it due to, quote, concerns about the crew, end quote. That decision, as it turns out, was good for Aerosmith, but really bad for Lynyrd Skynyrd, because this was the plane and the crew that Lynyrd Skynyrd decided to use. On October 17, 1977, Lynyrd Skynyrd released that 5th album called Street Survivor and immediately went out on tour to support it. Exactly 3 days after the release of that album, they boarded the Convair CV300 on a flight from Greenville, South Carolina to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where they were to play a concert at LSU, otherwise known as Louisiana State University. As the plane was at 6,000 feet, the pilots radioed in that they were running out of fuel and losing altitude. About 13 minutes after that report, the plane crashed outside of Gillsburg, Mississippi. Among the people killed in the crash were the pilot and the co-pilot, whom the National Transportation Board held responsible for the crash. Also killed were band lead singer Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, backup singer and Steve's older sister Cassie Gaines, and the band's assistant road manager Dean Kilpatrick. 20 other people on the plane did survive the crash, some with injuries, some not. The immediate result of the crash was that Lynyrd Skynyrd broke up for a decade before getting back together. In the interim, some of the surviving members of the band formed the Rosington Collins Band. When the band did get back together, Ronnie Van Zant's younger brother Johnny became the new lead singer. Their first show back, by the way, was in Baton Rouge, the place that they were going to during that fateful airplane flight. Still, something about that plane and its crew made Aerosmith's people not use the plane, but didn't for some reason seem to bother Lynyrd Skynyrd's people. If you could only take back some decisions. 2 decisions about one plane changed the lives of many, saving some, dooming others. The plane crash that claimed the lives of 4 members of Lynyrd Skynyrd, plus the pilot and the co-pilot, on October 20th, 1977. A quick mention about an event that has a musical side note to it. On October 17, 1989, a 6.9 earthquake hit the San Francisco Bay Area, killing 63 people and injuring 3,800 others. It was the strongest earthquake in the area since the 1906 earthquake that created the fire that practically wiped out the city of San Francisco. From a musical standpoint, the band Four Non-Blondes was supposed to have their very first practice together in the Bay Area that day, but postponed it for obvious reasons. The earthquake wasn't a bad omen for them, though. They eventually hit it big with the song What's Up, and lead singer and songwriter Linda Perry became an award-winning producer and songwriter. Before we continue, we'd like to tell you about the Music History Today podcast, where we go over the events that happened on that particular day in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops every single day, including weekends, on this podcast network. Now, back to the Music History In-Depth podcast. This next incident tells the tale of how people can become born again. If you are yourself born again or change religions for whatever reasons, it may have been a traumatic event that may have pushed you to convert. You probably didn't have an event quite like this one, though. There once was a time when the Reverend Al Green was simply known as Al Green. He was born Albert Leornus Green on April 13th, 1946 in Forest City, Arkansas, and started out singing in his group, the Green Brothers, which included his sister during high school. I guess calling the group the Green Family was out of the question, because, sister, not a brother. Just saying. Anyway, Al was kicked out of his house and had to fend for himself when his extremely religious father caught him listening to secular music, specifically Jackie Wilson. That was kind of a no-no back in the day. While still in high school, Al moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and eventually went to live with a prostitute. Al also started another group called Al Green and the Creations. It was through that group that he was noticed by Memphis record producer Willie Mitchell, who signed him to a record contract with High Records, and he dropped the letter E at the end of his name and began spelling it like the color green. Al found early success with his debut single in 1967, Backup Train, which went to number 5 on the American R&B singles chart. From there, Al went on a roll, including 6 straight number 1 albums on the American R&B charts. He also had now classic hits from the late 60s to the mid-70s, such as Let's Stay Together, Tired of Being Alone, Love and Happiness, Look What You've Done for Me, You Ought to Be With Me, Call Me. Apparently every name of his songs had me at the end of them. Here I Am, Living for You, Let's Get Married, Sha-La-La, Love, Full of Fire, Take Me to the River, and I'm Still in Love with You. By the mid-1970s, Al Green was looked at as the next version of Sam Cooke and his idol Jackie Wilson. He had the vocal style and the sex appeal, and he, like Sam and Jackie, developed a following, especially with his stage shows. There was a sexual attraction, let's say, with the ladies that drove them absolutely wild, and that is pretty much where his troubles started. Like I said before, If you are yourself born again or changed religions for whatever reason, it may have been a traumatic event that may have pushed you to convert. Enter traumatic event. This one stopped his career cold, after some heat, you might say. I'll explain. You see, there was a lady by the name of Mary Woodson White, and she, like most women of the era, fell in love with Al. Problem. Well, she was married. Oh, and she also had kids. Apparently, that did not stop her from going after Al. One day, she left her husband and kids in New Jersey and drove to Al's show in upstate New York. Somehow, some way, she ended up meeting Al. One thing led to another, and they became lovers because, groupies. Music, man. It's how it goes sometimes. Somewhere along the line, she either became an ex-girlfriend of his, or they were still sort of seeing each other, let's say, depending on whose version of the story you're going with, I guess. Be that as it may, on the night of October 18th, 1974, when Al got back to his house in Memphis, Tennessee, after flying all night from a concert in San Francisco, Mary was at his doorstep waiting for him. And here is where the story gets all sorts of twisted. Only two people truly know what went down that night, but here's the gist of the events that evening that we know. Something prompted Mary to snap. The rumor is that Mary wanted Al to marry her even though she was still married. Details, Anyway, Al went to take a bath. Sometime during that bath, Mary came into the bathroom with a pot full of hot grits. Again, not sure if the grits were made by her or by him before he went to take a bath. Then she poured the boiling hot water onto Al, leaving him with severe burns. Mary then went to Al's bedroom where she found his gun. Not sure how she knew that he had a gun. I'm assuming that she either stayed there or he at least showed it to her once. In any event, she took the .38 caliber pistol and, well, let's just say that Mary did not leave Al's place vertically. Read between the lines on that one. I can't really say what exactly went down. It is streaming service. In any event, according to some reports, Mary left a note in her purse detailing what she would do, so I guess this was not exactly a spur-of-the-moment type of thing, we'll say. Once Al recovered from his burns, he decided that the event was a sign from God that he had strayed way too far down the path of sin and needed to get back on the right path. He had technically been born again a year earlier, but now he decided to fully commit. At the height of his soul singing career, Al Green quit singing soul music and started doing gospel music. Not only that, but he also decided to become a preacher. He became an ordained minister in 1976. Talk about totally committing. He eventually went back to performing secular soul music, but he still preaches to this day. And now you know what prompted Al Green to become the Reverend Al Green. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that even after his religious conversion, he was accused by his ex-wife Shirley, who married him after he became a minister, of repeated physical and emotional abuse, including hitting her with a boot after refusing to have sex because she was 5 months pregnant at the time with their child. He admitted to all this while under oath during their divorce filing in 1982, according to reports. The grits incident that burned the Reverend Al Green and turned him into the Reverend Al Green on October 18th, 1974. There are a boatload of birthdays to celebrate this week, so before I highlight two of them, I'm just going to wish all of these people a happy birthday first. Starting with October 16th, we have the great guitarist, singer-songwriter, Mr. John Mayer. We also have Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead, Bob Mould from Husker Du and Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Oh, also for you Wilson Phillips fans out there, Wendy Wilson has her birthday on that date. October 17th has Eminem, Wyclef Jean of the Fugees, Ziggy Marley, and Chris Kirkpatrick of NSYNC. October 17th also happens to be the birthday of one David St. Hubbins of the band Spinal Tap. He's better known as actor-singer Michael McKean. On October 18th, it's Neo's birthday, along with singer Laura Nyro and Zac Efron from High School Musical. There's also another legend whose birthday it is, but we'll get to him later. October 19th rolls in with reggae great Peter Tosh, while October 20th sees birthdays for Snoop Dogg and one other artist who we'll also get to in a couple of minutes. October 21st has the great Dizzy Gillespie and the Queen of Salsa herself, the iconic Miss Celia Cruz. It's also Doja Cat and Kane Brown's birthdays as well. October 22nd has classical composing great Franz Liszt's birthday, along with rappers 21 Savage and Roddy Ricch, and DJ Laidback Luke. Let's go back to October 20th for a split second here, specifically to October 20th, 1950. Tom Petty was one of those guys who I think people took for granted while he was alive. He wasn't revered like, say, Bono or Paul McCartney. Even once he passed away on October 2nd, 2017, people automatically went to his hits Free Falling and I Won't Back Down, thinking that that's all the guy's ever done. Well, they're wrong. Really wrong. Tom Petty, both with and without the Heartbreakers, did so much more. In fact, every musician owes whatever money they make to him for one specific reason, because he fought for his rights and theirs in the process. I could go on about all the hits that he had, like Last Dance with Mary Jane, Don't Come Around Here No More, You Got Lucky, American Girl, Breakdown, and so many others. But I'm going to stick with one event, his bankruptcy. Here's what happened. When Tom signed his very first record deal, what he didn't realize was that he had signed away all of his songwriting rights for $10,000. That meant that for any and all past and future royalties, whatever he made, his record company and the people who basically screwed him out of his money would make 100 times as much. And here is where I say, get yourself a really good entertainment lawyer and don't get corralled into signing a bad contract like virtually every other musical artist out there since the dawn of time. Anyway, Tom sued to get out of his contract, but then the record label sued him right back, claiming breach of contract. What he and his manager did next was sheer brilliance. Tom Petty declared bankruptcy. Now, normally you would think that that was a bad thing. What this did, though, was at that time, all contracts and debts had to be renegotiated, which protected Petty from both the record company's lawsuit and would also mean a much smaller piece of the pie for them. Well, the record companies didn't want any other artist trying this little routine, so they struck a deal with Petty out of court. Petty got his own record label imprint, but more importantly, he also got his songwriting and publishing rights back. In short, Tom Petty, by filing for bankruptcy, beat the record labels at their own game. And that is why Tom Petty is so important to rock and roll, and that's what makes the lyrics to I Won't Back Down more important. Unfortunately, Tom's death came, much like Prince's, from cardiac arrest brought on by medication on October 2nd, 2017. So, happy heavenly birthday, and thank you to Tom Petty. Thanks for standing up for your rights, and most importantly, thanks for some damn great music, dude. Some damn great music. Let's go back now even further and go to October 18th. Chuck Berry was born on October 18, 1926 in St. Louis, Missouri. From the beginning, Chuck was interested in music. He performed during high school, but once he got out of high school, he settled into normal life, got married, and worked on an assembly plant assembling cars. He still had the music bug, though, so he started performing with the Johnny Johnson Trio, and it was there that he honed his showmanship skills, having studied what T-Bone Walker was doing on stage. One day in May of 1955, Berry went to Chicago, Illinois. He happened to meet the great Muddy Waters, who told him to have a talk with Leonard Chess of Chess Records. Chess took a look at Berry, and they saw that rhythm and blues was beginning to go down in popularity, and they were looking to stretch their sound into new genres. And they thought that Chuck might just be the person to help them do that. Chuck had a bunch of hits in the first decade of his career, from Maybelline to Johnny Be Good to No Particular Place to Go, and rock and roll music. Berry geared his music towards teenagers. He talked about good times, cars, girls, and fun. His stage act became legendary, especially when he bent down and hopped across the stage on one leg, which became known as the duck walk. He gave rock and roll its swagger before anybody else, even before Elvis. He also made a good living with his touring. In short, Chuck Berry became the template for other artists to copy. One particular song was a call to arms for rock and roll. At the time, classical music, jazz, and standards were all the rage. Rock and roll was beginning to bubble up, and Chuck had an awful lot to do with that. The story goes that Chuck was sick and tired of his sister always using the family piano to play classical music when he wanted to play rock and roll, so he wrote a song about it. He recorded the song on April 16th, 1956 for Chess Records. It was part of his Rock, Rock, Rock album, which was supposed to be the soundtrack for a movie of the same name. It was also one of the first songs to name check, as he referred to Louis Jordan and Carl Perkins songs, and to Bo Diddley himself. It was released in May of that year, and the song has gone on to be inducted into many a songwriting hall of fame. That song? That's Roll Over Beethoven. As with most acts, with the good comes the bad, and Berry was no different. Berry was busted as a child for armed robbery. In 1962, he served 1.5 years of a 3-year sentence for transporting a minor across state lines. Some people believe that it was a made-up charge based on racism. He also later in life got caught for tax evasion and also was sued for filming women changing their clothes in a bathroom. The latter charge he denied, but the suit was settled out of court. Chuck continued to play almost 100 shows a year worldwide, and then cut back to playing at least once a month at a local restaurant near St. Louis. I actually saw him perform at a college spring concert back in the 80s at my alma mater, the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Towards the end of his life, as one would expect from a man who lived into his 90s, it was not easy to perform. He lived in Ladue, Missouri, which is just west of St. Louis. For 18 years, he played a monthly gig at a local restaurant and bar in St. Louis called Blueberry Hill, named, of course, after Fats Domino's hit song. On October 15th, 2014, Chuck Berry played his final gig there. It would be his final full performance anywhere. Chuck Berry passed away in 2017 at the age of 90. Today, Chuck is considered to be one of the great pioneers of rock and roll. When the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted its first class in 1986, Chuck Berry's name was front and center on the first ballot. On Rolling Stone magazine's Greatest Artists of All Time list, he is ranked at number 5. 6 of his songs made Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time list, with Johnny Be Good being the highest at number 7. Johnny Be Good is also the only rock and roll song that was put on the gold record of the Voyager spacecraft that's out in space right now, somewhere I think just past the solar system officially. now in deep outer space. Father of rock and roll indeed. Happy heavenly birthday to the father of rock and roll, the one who gave rock and roll the template to work with girls, cars, and fun in the sun, Mr. Chuck Berry, who was born on October 18th, 1926. And that is it for the Music History to In-Depth podcast for October 16th through the 22nd. Thank you very, very much for listening and or watching if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify.